In fact, he has a different frame, which is that AI is like a new version of digital. It's like a flood of millions of new digital immigrants, of alien digital immigrants that are Nobel Prize level capability, work at superhuman speed, will work for less than minimum wage. We're all worried about, immigration of the other countries next door taking labor jobs. What happens when AI immigrants come in and take all of the cognitive labor? If you're worried about immigration, you should be way more worried about AI.
So today, we're breaking down a shocking interview with Tristan Harris, former Google ethics lead and the co-creator of The Social Dilemma, that Netflix documentary exposing how social media quietly hacked our brains and triggered a wave of unintended damage. In this conversation with Stephen Bartlett from the Diary of a CEO podcast, Tristan warns that billionaire tech CEOs are pushing humanity down a path no one asked for, and that if we don't do anything now to stop them, it's not going to end well. He also talks about why this is happening, who is actually driving this future, and what happens if we just let it happen. Spoiler alert, it's not good. Let's get into it. All right, so first off, Tristan explains that deploying AI widely into the real world has already caused major issues, long before ChatGPT even existed. He explains that social media was actually the first misaligned AI, and the consequences are already being felt. But what's coming next, generative AI that can actually understand and speak our language, well, that's a completely different beast.
The AI behind social media was kind of humanity's first contact between a narrow, misaligned AI that went rogue. Mm-hmm. Because if you think about it, it's like there you are, you open TikTok and you see a video and you think you're just watching a video, but when you swipe your finger and it shows you the next video, at that time you activated one of the largest supercomputers in the world, pointed at your brainstem, calculating what 3 billion other human social primates have seen today, and knowing before you do which of those videos is most likely to keep you scrolling. It makes a prediction. So it's an AI that's just making a prediction about which video to recommend to you. But Twitter's doing that with which tweet should be shown to you. Instagram's doing that with which photo or videos to be shown to you. And so all of these things are these narrow, misaligned AIs just optimizing for one thing, which is what's going to keep you scrolling. And that was enough to wreck and break democracy and to create the most anxious and depressed generation of our lifetime just by this very simple baby AI. And people didn't even notice it because it was called social media instead of AI. But it was the first, we used to call it, in this AI dilemma talk that my co-founder and I gave, we called it humanity's first contact with AI because it was just a narrow AI. And what ChatGPT represents is this whole new wave of generative AI that is a totally different beast because it speaks language, which is the operating system of humanity. Like if you think about it, it's trained on code, it's trained on text, it's trained on all of Wikipedia, it's trained on Reddit, it's trained on everything, all law, all religion. And all of that gets sucked into this digital brain that has unique properties. And that is what we're living with ChatGPT.
So yeah, we've all seen the harms social media has already caused. Anxiety, polarization, social isolation, cultural degradation, but we've also all seen the benefits, connecting with people, new opportunities, instant knowledge, all of that. And with generative AI, we're going to see those same trade-offs, except this time, the benefits are so insanely powerful that even the worst negative consequences start to feel worth the risk, at least to the people racing to build it. Check this out.
And we already have AIs that can obviously beat Garry Kasparov at chess, beat Go, the Go Asian board game, or now beat StarCraft. So you have AIs that are beating humans at strategy games. Well, think about StarCraft compared to an actual military campaign, in Taiwan or something like that. If I have an AI that can outcompete in strategy games, that lets me outcompete everything. Or take business strategy. If I have an AI that can do business strategy and figure out supply chains and figure out how to optimize them and figure out how to undermine my competitors, and I have a step function level increase in that compared to everybody else, then that gives me infinite power to undermine and outcompete all businesses. If I have a super programmer, then I can outcompete programming. 70 to 90% of the code written at today's AI labs is written by AI.
Thinking about the stock market as well.
Thinking about the stock market. If I have an AI that can trade in the stock market better than all the other AIs, because there's mostly AIs that are actually trading on the stock market, but if I have a jump in that, then I can consolidate all the wealth. If I have an AI that can do cyber hacking, that's way better at cyber hacking and a step function above what everyone else can do, then I have an asymmetric advantage over everybody else. So AI is like a power pump. It pumps economic advantage, it pumps scientific advantage, and it pumps military advantage, which is why the countries and the companies are caught in what they believe is a race to get there first. And anything that is a negative consequence of that, job loss, rising energy prices, more emissions, stealing intellectual property, security risks, all of that stuff feels small relative to if I don't get there first, then some other person who has less good values as me, they'll get AGI, and then I will be forever a slave to their future. And I know this might sound crazy to a lot of people, but this is how people at the very top of the AGI AI world believe is currently happening. And that's
you've
what
had those
justifies
conversations.
Yeah.
So that was basically the AI race explained in 2 minutes. The incentives to build this technology first far outweigh the potential risks. That's what he claims people at the top believe. But it actually goes deeper than that. In fact, he says some of these top AI CEOs believe in the inevitable replacement of biological life, us, with digital life, and even look at it as a good thing. And he says that they have almost an ego-religious intuition that they will somehow be a part of that future. Just take a look at this.
There's a quote that a friend of mine interviewed a lot of the top people at the AI companies, like the very top. And he just came back from that and basically reported back to me and some friends. And he said the following: in the end, a lot of the tech people I talk to, when I really grill them on it about like why you're doing this, they retreat into number one, determinism. Number two, the inevitable replacement of biological life with digital life. And number three, that being a good thing anyways. At its core, it's an emotional desire to meet and speak to the most intelligent entity that they've ever met. And they have some ego-religious intuition that they'll somehow be a part of it. It's thrilling to start an exciting fire. They feel they'll die either way, so they prefer to light it and see what happens.
That is the perfect description of the private conversations.
Doesn't that match what
That's
you
the
have?
perfect description.
Doesn't it? And that's the thing. So people may hear that and they're like, well, that sounds ridiculous. But if you actually...
I just got goosebumps because it's the perfect description, especially the part they'll think they'll die either way.
Exactly. Well, and worse than that, some of them think that in the case where if they were to get it right and if they succeeded, they could actually live forever. Because if AI perfectly speaks the language of biology, it will be able to reverse aging, cure every disease. And so there's this kind of, I could become a god. And I'll tell you, you and I both know people who've had private conversations. Well, one of them that I have heard from one of the co-founders of one of the most powerful of these companies, when faced with the idea that what if there's an 80% or 20% chance that everybody dies and gets wiped out by this, but an 80% chance that we get utopia, he said, well, I would clearly accelerate and go for the utopia. Given a 20% chance.
It's crazy.
People should feel you do not get to make that choice on behalf of me and my family. We didn't consent to have 6 people make that decision on behalf of 8 billion people. We have to stop pretending that this is okay or normal. It's not normal. And the only way that this is happening and they're getting away with it is because most people just don't really know what's going on.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the mindset at the very top. But here's the thing. Even if they do build their digital utopia, what does our life look like in that world? Do we actually get a piece of that abundance? Do we get more free time? Do our lives actually get better? Or do we just lose our jobs, lose our purpose, and become completely irrelevant? Tristan says the math does not add up, especially when a handful of trillion-dollar companies control all the wealth. Because again, going back to incentives, what reason would Sam Altman have to share the billions he's making off ChatGPT with you or with me, even if it wiped out our livelihoods? Here's how Tristan sees it.
And I'm just wondering, in such a future where you think about even yourself and your family and your friends, what are you going to be spending your time doing in such a world of abundance? If there was 10 billion
Well, the question is, are we going to
robots-
get abundance or are we going to get just jobs being automated? And then the question is still, who's going to pay for people's livelihoods? So the math, as I understand it, doesn't currently seem to work out where everyone can get a stipend to pay for their whole life and life quality that as they currently know it. And are a handful of Western or US-based AI companies going to consciously distribute that wealth to literally everyone, meaning including all the countries around the world whose entire economy was based on a job category that got eliminated? So for example, places like the Philippines where, a huge percent of the jobs are customer service jobs. If that got automated away, are we going to have OpenAI pay for all of the Philippines? Do you think that people in the US are going to prioritize that? So then you end up with the problem of you have law firms that are currently not wanting to hire junior lawyers because, well, the AI is way better than a junior lawyer who just graduated from law school. So you have two problems. You have the law student that just put in a ton of money and is in debt because they just got a law degree that now they can't get hired to pay off. And then you have law firms whose longevity depends on senior lawyers being trained from being a junior lawyer to a senior lawyer. What happens when you don't have junior lawyers that are actually learning on the job to become senior lawyers? You just have this sort of elite managerial class for each of these domains. So you lose intergenerational knowledge transmission.
Interesting.
And that creates a societal weakening in the social fabric.
Do you think UBI will work as a concept? UBI, for anyone that doesn't know, is basically
universal basic income.
Distributing
everybody
money.
gets a stipend.
Giving people money every month.
But I mean, we have that with Social Security. We've done this when it came to pensions. That was after the Great Depression, I think in like 1935, 1937, FDR created Social Security. But what happens when you have to pay for everyone's livelihood everywhere in every country? Again, how can we afford that?
Well, if the costs go down 10x of making things.
This is where the math gets very confusing because I think the optimists say you can't imagine how much abundance and how much wealth it will create. And so we will be able to generate that much. But the question is, what is the incentive again for the people who've consolidated all that wealth to redistribute it to everybody else?
We just have to tax them.
And how will we do that when the corporate lobbying interests of trillion-dollar AI companies can massively influence the government more than human political power?
So yeah, I know this sounds terrifying, and you might be feeling a little helpless right now. It feels like everything is happening so fast, and the most important decisions in human history are being made without our input, and without most people even realizing it. But it's important to realize that the future is not inevitable. Tristan says we've seen this pattern before. Cigarettes, fossil fuels, plastics, social media. The formula is always the same. Profits first, hide the harms, deny everything. But Tristan says this time, we can't just wait until the damage is done, because we might literally not get a second chance. Although, if society sees the incentives clearly right now, we might actually be able to force a different path in time. Check this out.
And every time we saw it with cigarettes, with fossil fuels, with asbestos, with forever chemicals, with social media, the formula is always the same. Immediately print money on the product that's driving a lot of growth, hide the harm, deny it, do fear, uncertainty, doubt political campaigns that's so, merchants of doubt, propaganda that makes people doubt whether the consequences are real. Say, we'll do a study. We'll know in 10 years whether social media did harm kids. They did all of those things. But we don't have that time with AI. And B, you can actually know a lot of those harms if you know the incentive. Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's business partner, said, if you show me the incentive, and I will show you the outcome. If you know the incentive, which is for these companies with AI, to race as fast as possible, to take every shortcut, to not fund safety research, to not do security, to not care about rising energy prices, to not care about job loss, and just to race to get there first, that is their incentive. That tells you which world we're going to get. There is no arguing with that. And so if everybody just saw that clearly, we'd say, okay, great, let's not do that. Let's not have that incentive, which starts with culture. Public clarity that we say no to that bad outcome, to that path. And then with that clarity, what are the other solutions that we want? We can have narrow AI tutors that are non-anthropomorphic, that are not trying to be your best friend, that are not trying to be therapists at the same time they're helping you with your homework. More like Khan Academy, which does those things. So you can have carefully designed different kinds of AI tutors that are doing it the right way. You can have AI therapists that are not trying to say, tell me your most intimate thoughts and let me separate you from your mother, and instead do very limited kinds of therapy that are not screwing with your attachment. So if I do cognitive behavioral therapy, I'm not screwing with your attachment system. We can have mandatory testing. Currently, the companies are not mandated to do that safety testing. We can have common safety standards that they all do. We can have common transparency measures so that the public and the world's leading governments know what's going on inside these AI labs, especially before this recursive self-improvement threshold. So that if we need to negotiate treaties between the largest countries on this, they will have the information that they need to make that possible. We can have stronger whistleblower protections so that if you're a whistleblower and currently your incentives are, I would lose all of my stock options if I told the world the truth, and those stock options are going up every day, we can empower whistleblowers with ways of sharing that information that don't risk losing their stock options. So there's a whole bunch, and we can have, instead of building general, inscrutable, autonomous, like dangerous AI that we don't know how to control, that blackmails people and is self-aware and copies its own code, we can build narrow AI systems that are about actually applied to the things that we want more of. So, making stronger and more efficient agriculture, better manufacturing, better educational services that would actually boost those areas of our economy without creating this risk that we don't know how to control. So there's a totally different way to do this if we were crystal clear that the current path is unacceptable.
So yeah, he lays out a ton of things AI companies could be doing differently, like building narrow, helpful AI systems, tutors that actually help with learning, mental health tools that don't manipulate us, transparency and safety requirements before deployment, etc. But what can we do? What can the average Joe watching this, who isn't an AI researcher working at OpenAI, do? This is exactly what Stephen Bartlett asks him towards the end of the interview. And here is his response.
So what do I do today? What does Jack do today? What do we do? I think we need to protest.
Yeah. I think it's going to come to that. I think because people need to feel it is existential before it actually is existential. And if people feel it is existential, they will be willing to risk things and show up for what needs to happen, regardless of what that consequence is. Because the other side of where we're going is a world that you won't have power and you won't want. So better to use your voice now maximally to make something else happen. Only vote for politicians who will make this a tier 1 issue. Advocate for some kind of negotiated agreement between the major powers on AI that use rule of law to help govern the uncontrollability of this technology so we don't wipe ourselves out. Advocate for laws that have safety guardrails for AI companions. We don't want AI companions that manipulate kids into suicide. We can have mandatory testing and transparency measures so that everybody knows what everyone else is doing and the public knows and the governments know so that we can actually coordinate on a better outcome. And to make all that happen is going to take a massive public movement. And the first thing you can do is to share this video with the 10 most powerful people you know and have them share it with the 10 most powerful people that they know, because I really do think that if everybody knows that everybody else knows, then we would choose something different. And I know that at an individual level, there you are at a mammal hearing this, and it's like, you just don't feel how that's going to change. And it will always feel that way as an individual. And it will always feel impossible until the big change happens. Before the civil rights movement happened, did it feel like that was easy and that was going to happen? It always feels impossible before the big changes happen. And that when that does happen, it's because thousands of people worked very hard ongoingly every day to make that unlikely change happen.
So this isn't destiny. We're not locked into a future where 6 CEOs decide the fate of 8 billion people, but only if we act while we still can. Because I completely agree with him that the current incentives are forcing us into a reckless global race towards superintelligence, and that there will be very good things that come from this, but also potentially some very bad things. Think of it like social media in 2013. It was still new, still exciting, and no one fully understood the side effects yet. We didn't know algorithms would hijack our attention. We didn't know they'd shape our politics, our self-worth, our worldviews. We didn't know kids would grow up addicted to a dopamine slot machine. But now we know. And social media algorithms were just the tip of the iceberg of what AI will be. So imagine if, in 2013, the world stepped in and said, let's make sure this serves humanity, not the other way around. What would the last decade have looked like, as opposed to what it actually looked like? With AI, we don't have to make that same mistake. And it's imperative we don't. because the consequences will be far worse than an uptick in depression and anxiety. So let me know what you guys think. Are we headed toward a digital utopia or a disaster disguised as progress? And do you think we still have time to steer it into a quote, better direction? Drop your thoughts below. Anyways, thanks for watching. If you found this breakdown helpful or thought-provoking, please consider hitting that like button so more people can see this conversation. Also, make sure to subscribe if you want to stay ahead of what's coming. And as always, I'll be catching you guys in the next one.